your family comes from Hungary. It is also Jewish. Can you tell about when you'd mentioned your dad before? Can you tell about when your dad, your uncle, and your uncle left Hungary for the
Yeah,
greener pastures of Britain? Was there a rising anti-Semitism at the time?
I think that the level of anti-Semitism in Hungary has always been pretty steady. It has never had a need to rise. It rose somewhat in the late 30s and reached its peak in 1944 when 500,000 Hungarian Jews were sent to Auschwitz to be murdered. And indeed, Auschwitz was kept open long after the Germans had wanted to close and destroy it, just in order to receive and kill the bulk of the Hungarian Jews. On the other hand, speaking for my father's side of the family, my mother's side of the family is completely English. Um, uh, the vast majority of Hungarian Jews were almost completely assimilated into Hungarian life, Magyar speaking. The Austro-Hungarian Empire benefited from a first-class education system in which Hungarian Jews participated fully. You could not have expected that in Hungary, of all places, with that level of assimilation, that the Holocaust would strike with the effect that it did. Poland is easier to understand because many of the large population of Polish Jews still spoke Yiddish, still wore beards, and not all of them, of course, but they looked different. Most of the Hungarian Jews looked and spoke like other Hungarians. That did not save their lives, of course. I think it's emblematic of that level of anti-Semitism that even though 500,000 Hungarian Jews were killed, and even though the Jewish population of Hungary is now very small indeed, that the Hungarian government still blames their troubles on the Jews, which goes to prove a very old but true saying, which is that you don't need Jews in order to be anti-Semitic. Possibly.
Simon Wiesenthal, folks, says that the Simon Wiesenthal Center, folks, by the way, says that anti-Semitism is the biggest it has ever been in the world right now. And I had Alan Dershowitz on the show and we were talking, and I said, you know, everybody says the oldest vocation in the world is prostitution. I said, no, it's not. It's hating Jews. So, you know, this goes on. If a bus is late, you blame a Jew. Right? Yeah, it's ridiculous at this point.
Of course. If the potato crop fails in Poland, where the Jewish population is now about 3,000 instead of 3 million, people will still say the Jews did it. It'll be interesting to see whether China, with its enormous population, develops anti-Semitism, because there they will be developing anti-Semitism pretty much totally without Jews. So that would be an interesting phenomenon. But I am enough of a pessimist to think that the Chinese may find their way to do that.
Tell us about your uncle Alex and the wonderful success he had in Hollywood, and also your dad as well, and your other uncle, who was a set director, a decorator.
But the three Kellner brothers were indeed remarkable. My uncle Alex, at a young age, his father, my paternal grandfather, died, and at quite a young age, and my uncle Alex went to Budapest and became a university student, and then had the idea, because this was just happening, to begin a movie magazine. And it was quite successful. He was then not yet 20, he was 18 or 19. And he brought his brothers out of Pusztatopáca, the small village they were living on a farm in central Hungary, to Budapest. And my uncle Alex directed himself his first movie when he was 21 in 1914 in Budapest, and eventually brought his brothers into this essentially family business. My father became an Academy Award-winning art director. He won the Oscar for the Thief of Baghdad in 1940. My uncle Zoltan, the middle brother, became the director of such films as Drums, The Four Feathers, Sounds of the River, Sahara, and most importantly of all, after the war, Cry the Beloved Country, which was actually made in South Africa despite apartheid, and which was Sidney Poitier's first film. My uncle Alex succeeded on a vaster scale. He built up a movie studio in Budapest, which was destroyed during and after the war. He built another one in Berlin. When he left there, he went to Hollywood with his wife, my aunt Maria Korda, who was a silent movie star of the first magnitude. And that career failed partly because Alex was not making the kind of movies that the studio bosses wanted to make, partly because Maria was a great star in the silent movies, but once sound came in 1928, she spoke almost no English, and what she did speak, she spoke with a heavy Hungarian accent. And my uncle Alex then came back. Since he spoke almost every language with a Hungarian accent, he made in 1931 the famous motion picture Marius from Marcel Pagnol's enormously successful play starring Rémy and Pierre Freinet, and then went to London in 1932 and made the first great successful international English film, The Private Life of Henry VIII, which starred Charles Laughton and my to-be aunt Merle Oberon as Anne Boleyn, and my father did the art direction, and my uncle Alex produced it and directed, and that spun him out on a career that eventually made him the owner of a very big movie studio and movie business in England, and a partner in United Artists in Hollywood. And I don't know how many hundred movies he made in his lifetime, but many.
That Hamilton Woman is another, that Hamilton Woman starring Vivian Leigh and Sir Laurence Olivier. And that was one of Churchill's favorites, and so much so that Churchill wanted him to make it in America to try and not coerce, that's a wrong word, to try and attract American interest in what Britain was going through and the heroic challenges that lay in front of Britain. It is also referenced in a very famous movie that was made about Churchill. I think it was 2009. It was called Into the Storm, and it starred Gleason. I can't remember his first name. It was just a terrific movie. And there they are sitting in a room, and Churchill walks in, and it's a small little studio, folks. It's a small little theater, private theater. And he says, "My favorite film by my good friend Alex Korda." And there it is. It's referenced right there. How important was that movie?
Enormously. First of all, Churchill not only caused that movie to be made, he also took it to Moscow as a gift to Stalin the first time he went to Russia in 1942. And as a result, for many, many years after the Second World War, not just during, but after, the only English language movie that people could see in Soviet motion picture theaters was that Hamilton Woman with Russian subtitles. And at the time, it's important to remember that my uncle Alex had been one of the small band of wealthy men, including his friend, the great Canadian newspaper magnate whom I knew, Max Beaverbrook, and Brendan Bracken, the owner of the Financial Times, and Churchill's homme d'affaires and financial advisor and political fixer, and my uncle Alex, and I've forgotten his name, Sir Henry Strakosch, I think, a Jewish gold mining millionaire from South Africa. From 1932 to 1939, they kept the Churchill ship afloat on a tide of money because Churchill's lifestyle never differed whether he had money or didn't. So it required a tremendous amount of money to keep the whole thing going. Alex, my uncle Alex, hired Churchill to be historical advisor to London films at a salary of $25,000, over $100,000 a year in dollars in those days, and allowing for inflation and everything else would now be, I would guess, the equivalent of about at least $1.5 million. And in an age when taxes were very low. He also bought the motion picture rights to every one of Churchill's books, including ones that would never be filmed, like the 4-volume biography of Marlborough. And so Alex kept the Churchill ship afloat. In addition, Churchill loved to write movie scripts and worked both on the script for the film that Alex was going to make of Lawrence of Arabia's Revolt in the Desert, the abridgment of 7 Pillars of Wisdom, and also for that Hamilton woman. And if you watch that Hamilton woman today, you can absolutely tell when the film slows down and there is an exposition, it is completely and recognizably Churchillian. He inserted those speeches himself, as when Lord Hamilton, Sir William Hamilton, revolves the globe and explains to Lady Hamilton, this is our little island, and then pointing at Europe and at France, and this is what we must never admit, is that a tyrant conquers all Europe. And it is a perfect Churchillian speech. It takes place in the movie, early on in the movie, for about 2 or 3 minutes, and you can recognize the Churchillian timbre of it. I knew Churchill. I knew him. I met him quite often when I was a child. Nothing of an electric nature happened. I was 6 or 7 years old, and he was not a man who paid much attention to children, not even his own. So he didn't pay much attention to me. And I went to school with his grandson, and I'm friends with his great-grandson, Randolph Churchill. And so Churchill has always had a very special meaning for me. And he came to play, and I mean this in the best way possible, he came to play a central role in The Loan, not because I'd intended it, but because as I wrote the book, Churchill, in that way he has, took the book over, because it is increasingly his voice that speaks for what has to be done. And also his papers, his notes are the absolute, they're the things you cannot do without if you're going to write a history of 1939 to 1940 and the evacuation of Dunkirk.